Hello, and thank you for tuning into the Stuff I Heard podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Peak, and this is Cinco de Mayo, or May the 5th, as most folks call it here in America. Yesterday was May the 4th be with you. That's kind of a play on words, obviously, because it's May the 4th be with you if you're a Star Wars fan, but it's May the 4th, so that's kind of a thing that started. I don't exactly know when it started, but it caught on. So there's been years in the past where it's May 4th, and I've wore my Star Wars shirt to work with like another shirt over just so I don't get in trouble with HR. I don't want to offend anybody with my Star Wars shirt. But yeah, so it's a cultural thing, sort of taking on the lexicon of what we're doing in popular movies and TV with what we're doing in our social lives. It does tend to blend over a little bit. So the cool thing for me was this past week was the finale of The Bad Batch. Now, if anybody's watched The Bad Batch, it's been fun to watch this show. And they've had their third season and what they're calling their finale season that they wrapped up. Now, if you haven't seen The Bad Batch, just skip over this next part because I'm going to talk about it. Okay. I waited until the end. So, you guys, if you haven't watched it, that's on you. Just saying. Okay. So, we see The Bad Batch, the whole team. You've got the big brawler, which is Wrecker. You've got the guy that looks like Rambo, which is Hunter. You got Tech and Echo. One of them looks like a cyborg, and one of them is really good with computers. Um, both of them are actually pretty good with computers. And you got Crosshair, who is supposed to be a marksman, really, really skilled sniper. If you've ever played any type of video game where you can have a team together, this is kind of the team that you develop. You have Wrecker be your warrior or your person who draws out all of the energy of the bad guys to attack him. And he usually has the strongest defense. He usually has the thing that's going to get everybody's attention. But then you got other people that secretly come in and they help you with the battle. It's a simple formation of what we do in video games. World of Warcraft comes to mind. Different Dungeons and Dragons video games come to mind. But they've taken that a step further with this group. Now, you may be saying to yourself, I don't watch The Bad Batch. I don't care about Star Wars. That's fine. That's fine. This isn't for you. This is for me and the people that like me. Okay. Now, anybody who watches Star Wars, if you haven't watched the Clone Wars, go check it out. It's on Disney Plus. All of the episodes are easy to get through. I tell everybody time and time again, if you go to watch them and there's like an episode where they're in the water, you can skip the water episodes. None of those matter. They don't actually add up to anything. None of those characters are involved in anything you do later. To me, the water episodes are all filler episodes. There's not a lot of them, but if you see like all of a sudden they're underwater, you go, yeah, I can skip this because it's not important. Nothing is ever revealed in any of those episodes, but anything having to do with the clones, watch. Okay. They do a deep dive on who the clones are, how the Kaminoans created them from one person, basically one man's DNA, Jango Fett. And we saw a little bit of this in the prequel movies where Obi-Wan goes to the Kaminoans and discovers that Jango Fett's DNA has been replicated to make these stormtroopers. And they're on this fast growth cycle where they use his DNA to create this super soldier that's going to follow orders without question. Now, just the terms follow orders without question, right away you go, well, this could end badly because all you got to do is put in the wrong order, right? Which is why we get to the Order 66, quote unquote, Order 66. That's where the Emperor basically says, enact Order 66, which means the Jedi are now the bad guys. And so all of the stormtroopers turn on the Jedis, and there's a huge battle. They wage on for a long time. Most of the Jedis die, not because they're not capable of protecting themselves, but you're talking about sheer numbers and the element of surprise. The Jedi, up to this point, had never thought about stormtroopers being against them. So imagine having you at the front lines, like leading a battle, and all of a sudden, all of the troops that you're leading into battle turn on you. That's kind of what happened. So when this Bad Batch series started, we see Order 66 being called out. I mean, they're in the middle of doing a job helping out the quote unquote empire at the time. And Order 66 happens. Now, because the Bad Batch is considered the Bad Batch, that means that genetically they didn't quite match up like things were supposed to happen. They did some experiments on Camino to try and genetically modify some clones to make them a little bit different, which is why Wrecker looks so large, which is why the other guys have different skills and abilities. But with that means that when Order 66 happened, they didn't exactly take to it right away. It took a little longer for it to hit their brains, okay? Because they're wired differently. Their whole life has been different. But because they're different, they're way more capable than their brother that looks like them. Why do they call themselves 99? They call themselves Squadron 99 because they were very proud of a particular clone. When you're a clone, when you are identical of everybody else around you, you tend to want to have your own identity, right? Just like anybody else. I mean, doesn't matter who you are. If you're born into a family, you go, yeah, but I'm the smart one. I'm the clever one. I'm the one that does this thing that's special. You want to find something that's special in you, right? So they all started giving each other nicknames, and the nickname sort of stuck. They would go by their official number as a clone, but they also had names. I mean, that's why we have Rex and Cody and these guys that are supposed to be like the coolest versions of the stormtroopers. They become leaders in a way. And so, the Bad Batch had a guy, or the clones had a guy who was called 99. He just was called 99. He was the 99th one made, and there was a lot wrong with him physically. He had genetic defects. He, for all intents and purposes, was handicapped, but he was very loyal and he wanted to help his brothers. And he knew that, okay, well, I can't help my brothers by being exactly like them, but I can do what I can do well. And so he ended up in the Clone Wars saving a lot of people's lives just by doing the things that he does well and showing his bravery in his own way, in a way that saved so many of them that they felt it was an honor to know him and to be more like him. And so this group of what they call defects became Squadron 99. And so that is the Bad Batch. Now, this show starts off with Order 66. They are out with a Jedi and a Padawan, and all of the stormtroopers in the area um, turn on the Jedi and kill her. And in the process, there's a young Caleb Doom who sees this happen and barely escapes with his life, partially because the Bad Batch sort of protects him. They see all this happen and like, what are you doing? Why are you attacking them? And they kind of help him escape. In his escape, though, he, and this is like a long period where we don't see him, becomes the guy that you see in Rebels. He becomes the Freddie Prinze Jr. voice actor guy who's the lead guy in Rebels. Um, he changes his name. He goes by a different name. It comes out later that that is indeed him. It's kind of a neat circle of life situation. He wanted to get away from being a Jedi and then sort of became a Jedi again through his interaction with Ezra Bridger. Now, okay, that's just how the show starts, is just with this interaction and Caleb, running away. Um, then Crosshair is this he's got this thing in his brain where he heard the order and he starts to follow the order. He starts to go after the kid, and the other brothers have to sort of be at odds with him. And so for much of the seasons 1 and 2, they're basically adversaries because he keeps saying in his head, good soldiers follow orders. I'm told to do this. This is what I'm supposed to do. I've been taught my whole life to follow orders, blah, 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 blah. And it shows you how, no matter how much you think you have individuality, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you just want to follow orders. They one by one discover this microchip in their brain due to a trooper named Five. They nicknamed him Five. Five was the first one that had been discovered that had this microchip in their brain that when they ordered 66, they couldn't refuse it. And Five had his chip removed. And through Ahsoka's help, that's where they then started to remove the chips of other stormtroopers so they could free them, like Cody and Rex and these guys that were leaders. And the Bad Batch had their chips removed. One by one, they found them and they removed them from each other. And at some point, so did Crosshair. But Crosshair still had this thing in his head of, I'm following orders. This is exactly what I'm told to do. It's what I was born to do. It's what I was trained to do. How can you guys not follow orders? And it hurts him to the point that he gets into a situation in season 2 where he sees things happen that he realizes is just not right. And he stands in between everything. He this General Rampart, Admiral Rampart, is just over flexing his power and hurting people. And at a certain point, Crosshair's had enough, and he turns on him. And in the process, he gets arrested and he gets put into a holding facility where they're doing experimentation. Now, we know from several movies and TV shows that the whole experimentation thing was them trying to figure out how to clone the Emperor. The Emperor realized that this Kaminoan stuff actually worked. And he's like, I want to be able to clone me because I've used the Force and I can see in the future I'm going to die at some point and I don't want to. I want to figure out how to live forever. Boy, doesn't that sound familiar? So he enacts every bit of resources he can to live on in this Project Necromancer. And part of the Project Necromancer we've heard about in the Mandalorian series with Moff Gideon cloning the Super Troopers that have the Beskar armor. It was also in an effort to try to catch baby Grogu so that they could adapt and morph some type of clone that has midichlorian count so that supposedly he can use the Force better. And it was this whole thing. Okay. So the Bad Batch is no different. It's just another version of that. And they're trying to clone people and they're trying to figure it out. Well, they're after Omega because Omega apparently is a clone that's been unmolested. They did not enhance her so that she grows rapidly, but she grew up right there on Camino. She's very smart. She knows a lot about computers. She also thinks on her own. And so she's actually older than the Bad Batch, who are her brothers. But they often looked at her as a father daughter type situation. They want to protect her. They want to take care of her. They want to help her not get hurt or not get taken because they are bigger and larger and more capable. So there's a weird dynamic between them. Hunter, in particular, sort of looks at her as his daughter, and she looks at him as his dad. But we see in season 3 that she is captured along with Crosshair, and she has a moment to escape. And instead of escaping by herself, she wants to free her brother, so she gets Crosshair out. And it really hits him in the heart because up until then, he'd only looked out for himself. And this moment of selflessness that she went through sort of made him realize that, oh, I am better with my group than I am by myself. And because she did this for me, I will do anything for her. So at any moment, you see her ask him for a favor that's going to be unsurmountable. And he's like, absolutely, I'll help you do whatever. And that's that loyalty. That's the loyalty that we all want and don't really talk about, but it's the loyalty that we appreciate, right? So these guys are extremely loyal to one another. They call each other brothers, brother and sister and all this stuff. And yet there's still this family unit of we are made from the same person, but we're different people. We've grown up to be different people. And that's kind of the idea of, doesn't matter who you are, you make decisions every day. 95, what was it Dr. Drew said? About 95 decisions a day, some of them important, some of them not. But if you multiply those 95 decisions per day times however old you are, that's a whole lot of decisions that have nothing to do with your DNA. You become your own person. And this group becomes that level of hero that is admirable. And Dave Filoni and his team did an excellent job with the show. The season ends up, everybody sort of gets out. Echo passed away in the end of season 2. R.I.P. Echo. I loved Echo, but he's gone. But the other guys live on, and you get to see a fast forwarded version at the end with a grown up version of Omega. Omega, it looks like she may be in her early 20s, and she's telling a very aged Hunter, "I am going to join the rebellion as a pilot. I want to lend my skills and fight my own fight to help out those that's less fortunate. And I think I can do that. And so here's the brilliant part about what George Lucas has done years ago is he's recognized that with gaps in time, you have areas to fill in information. There, if you go back, like yesterday, I went back and I watched the first movie back in 1977, A New Hope, they calling it now. But I watched the original Star Wars, and Alec Guinness has pauses in his speech where he's remembering and talking about things that are just long enough of a pause where you can see him remembering things that they've done since. Like they timed it just brilliantly in his speech where you can tell that maybe George Lucas didn't have a plan to do all the stuff that he'd done then, but maybe he did. Maybe he was like, there's more here. Oh, this pause is important. Make it linger, make it last. And it's perfect. It's perfect. Now, of course, there's tiny little flaws, but I'm not going to pick it apart. This isn't that kind of show. Uh, but I love the show. Um, I liked all of the characters. It was interesting to see them all develop and grow and change. And I'm looking forward to what they're going to do next. I think that the Star Wars universe is in capable hands of Dave Filoni, and Jon Favreau has been part of this growth as well, and I think that nothing but great things are going to come from it. So, with that being said, that was this past Wednesday that the finale of The Bad Batch came out, and then we got some new content. Now, it's just a tiny little bit of content, but it's called Tales of the Empire. So, what was it? October? I'm looking online. October of 22, they came out with Tales of the Jedi, which was 6 episodes. It had to do with two characters. They did 3 episodes based upon Ahsoka Tano and her being a baby to her basically training with Anakin because he was preparing her to fight against a horde of stormtroopers. He kind of knew something was going to happen to her, and he loved her so much that he wanted to protect her. So he trained her super, super, super hard because he knew that she was going to have to defend herself at some point, and he wasn't sure exactly from what, but he could tell just through dreams and trying to predict what's going to happen to her that something bad was going to happen and needed to protect her by making her better. That was the first that was the first 3 episodes. The next 3 episodes was about Count Dooku. Now, Count Dooku came from being a Jedi, an honored knight of the Jedi Temple, to basically falling out of um, the disillusion of what the Jedi Temple had become and how they had moved from being peacekeepers to being sort of part of the war machine and hurting a lot of people in the process. And it was all because they were being swayed and moved by Emperor Palpatine from within. He was Senator Palpatine at the time, but he was using the Force to sway their opinions towards being more militaristic and in the process hurting more people than helping. And Dooku knew that, and Dooku tried to fight against it, but was met with opposition by people who didn't have a clear vision of what was really going on. To the point that eventually Palpatine swayed him enough to challenge the temple that he ended up, you know, killing Yaddle and turning full dark side. So if you haven't seen those, check out Tales of the Jedi. They're really short episodes. The counter on them says they're about 17 minutes long, but you got an intro and an outro. So it's probably more like 14 minutes. They're not really long. You can watch all 6 of them pretty quickly. But May the 4th, yesterday, Tales of the Empire came out. And this is this is now Empire characters, okay? But not necessarily the Empire characters you're thinking of. I thought they might do one on Mace Windu or on um, General Grievous or something like that. No, this one started off with Morgan Elsbeth. We've seen her in Ahsoka and also in um, The Mandalorian. She's the one that had the temple that they broke into, and then Ahsoka Tano and her had this big fight. She also was in the Ahsoka Tano series. She's the one that went with um, what's his face, the guy, the big guy. Anyway, she she's the Night Sister that ended up using her magic to then take them to some place to find Thrawn. She's an interesting character, but I didn't know much about her past. And so this goes back and it shows her as a young woman. Um, Basically, her clan of Night Sisters was overthrown by separatists, which is the droid army. The droid army came down and they basically killed everybody except for her, and or so she thought. And she was then saved by a woman from a mountain tribe. This peace-loving lady came down and saved her and brought her to her people, and was trying to protect her, trying to help her out. And in the process, um, Morgan ended up, getting the woman's daughter killed and a lot of the matron's daughter killed, and it was bad. So she ended up having to go out on her own. And they did this kind of like this story where Yoda is giving the speech about how fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. He talked about Anakin having the fear. So this, you get to see Morgan as a young girl have fear, and that fear turns her towards anger. And in that anger, she, in the next episode, um, starts working towards building something more. And it's just out of revenge. She wants to build some kind of place in the empire so that she has more power, so that she can get revenge on the people who wronged her, or so she thinks. And so she is very smart. She actually creates this thing called the TIE Defender. It is like a TIE fighter, but it's more efficient. It's a little more expensive, but it's got deflector shields, and it's got a better engine in it where it can use hyperspace, which is something that the smaller ships usually can't do. You hear them say this in the movies a lot whenever you see the TIE fighters. They're kind of fragile. They have those little flat wings on either side, and they bump into something and they spin out and blow up. Well, this one has these three um, crescent shaped wings on it that can together have a shielded ability, which makes them a little bit tougher, harder to attack. And she creates this thing. And in this proposal of trying to get jobs for her people on this planet that she's at, the Empire basically tells her, "Oh, we're just going to come to your planet and take your resources." Well, Admiral Thrawn is in control, and he hears of this, and he decides, "No, I'm not going to do that, but I kind of want to get to you and find out what your real motivation is." And she tells him it's for revenge. And he says, "Okay, I can work with that." And so he gives her the ability to make these things. And instead of making them as jobs, she basically enslaves all the people on the planet to work for her to make these things. And you get to see these defenders in the show Rebels. If you haven't seen Rebels, go watch it. Check it out. I watched it yesterday. Also, I watched a lot of Star Wars yesterday. Uh, but you get to see Thrawn really putting his money where his mouth is in relation to these defenders, and they're in full force of making them, and they're expensive. But um, the process doesn't go well, and you hear uh, Admiral Tarkin eventually say, "Okay, well, enough of this. We're going to put more money into Project Stardust." Well, Project Stardust ends up being the Death Star. So you hear moments of like military talk, and then it turns into something bigger, and you go, what is that? Oh, that's that thing. Oh, okay. Like Project Necromancer is supposed to be bringing the Emperor back to life, which we see that in the later movies. But anyway, so and then you get to see the Path of Anger, where you get a full or a Path of Hate, uh which is the full thing of basically God, what am I blanking on this? Morgan Elsbeth, she is in control of this temple. It's just before you see Ahsoka come to her. Um, a group of a senator and her people come to talk to her about how they're mistreating their people, and now she's there to help them get their independence, and that she needs to let her people go. And basically, she just decides to say no. She says no. She has them killed, burns all of the resources around them, sets the planet on fire. Um, but just before this senator dies, she puts out a distress call to Bo-Katan Kryze, which is how you end up seeing Ahsoka introduced is at this temple, coming through the forest, making her way up there, and then challenging Morgan Elsbeth. So you get that whole story, and then you get the story of Barriss Offee. Again, these are only short episodes. These are like, like I said, 15, 17 minutes. Barriss Offee was a Jedi. She was in Clone Wars just before Order 66 happened. She basically rebelled against the Jedi Order, saying that they were becoming too militaristic and hurting people that they shouldn't. And she sort of went the Dooku path of saying, you guys are overstretching your peacekeeping, and you're becoming very warmongering. And she challenged them both verbally and physically, to the point that there's a great episode of her basically having lightsaber duels with everybody: Mace Windu, Anakin Skywalker, Ahsoka Tano, and she eventually gets captured. And once she gets captured, she's put into a holding cell, and then weirdly, uh, Order 66 happens like right after that, and then boom, she's somehow spared because she was in prison. She was not. They had stripped her of her title. She wasn't supposed to be a Jedi anymore, and so she weirdly was spared her life because the stormtroopers come to her and go, "Good for you, you're not a Jedi anymore." And in this Tales of the Empire, she basically gets taken in by Grand Inquisitor and presented in front of Darth Vader to become a Inquisitor, to work for the dark side. So she becomes an Inquisitor, and she's out on a mission with what they call the Fourth Sister, and she starts to realize that this is not the way, and she has to challenge her sister, and then um, decides that, okay, well, maybe I am more Jedi leaning. This path isn't the path for me either. And she sort of goes on her own path, kind of like everybody else does eventually. I mean, she goes off on her own. You get to see an interaction with her and the fourth sister um, in the final episode, where full circle, she gets her sister to basically renounce the dark side as well. And yeah, so fantastic episodes. I liked it. I liked all of it. Um, but yeah, sometimes the rules and things that you're supposed to be following in one of these types of stories, it gives you absolutes. And the reality of life is we're none of us absolute. If we're smart enough, we're paying attention to everything. Doesn't matter what it is. We're entering into an election year right now. And I've heard friends and family talk about, oh, there's no good options. Doesn't matter who you vote for, it's going to be an 80-year-old that's just disillusioned with America. Yeah, there's other options. And there's a lot of people behind the other options, but popular wise, not a lot of people are talking about it in my area. Um, but yeah, that's a different episode. So just pay attention. There's other options. Okay. Um, Now, last week I had my wife on and we talked about our trip going to Jamaica. What I didn't talk about was the fact that there was stuff playing on the little TV screens that I watched going there and coming back. And neither one of them was great. Okay. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I just want you guys to know about it because this is stuff I heard and I want to tell you about some stuff I heard. So, The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Stupid title. Stupid title. Not much better of a movie. Um, it's supposed to be about Snow. Basically, in the Hunger Games, he's the old guy that's supposed to be in charge of the Hunger Games, who's ruthless and mean and all this stuff. And this is supposed to be about, well, how did he grow up? How did he end up that way? Okay, so right off the bat, I'm like, all right. And then he falls in love with a girl who sings. So there's a lot of music involved. So much so that it takes away from the story. I mean, it's really it's how do I say it? It's bad. Yeah, it's bad. Didn't care for it. Now, Rotten Tomatoes gave it an 89%. Something called Metacritic gave it a 54%. It got 6.8 out of 10. Hmm. Said the budget was 100 million. It made 337 million, which means they're going to make more of these things. Yay. Maybe they won't sing in the next one. Uh, I mean, you've got a horrible situation, and you're going back and you're making music about it or during it. Which I mean, okay, fine, sure. It didn't mesh well to me. It just seemed too forced. So yeah, I watched that going to Jamaica for vacation, and then on the way back, I watched Wonka. Now this is the Wonka that has Timothy Chalamet playing Willy Wonka, and it is a full-on musical. Now the difference is this one right off the bat lets you know it's a musical. This one just, it's no, end of times and desperation and people are dying and also I'm gonna sing in the middle of it. Blah, 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 blah. This is exactly what you'd think it'd be. It's a musical. And it's magical. And I didn't hate it. There are parts of it that are very stupid, but I liked it. I think kids will love it. I think that listen, they nailed this one, okay? It got 91% Rotten Tomatoes, 7 out of 10 on IMDb, 66% Metacritic. I don't know what that means. Uh it brought in a lot of money. They made $632.3 million in the box office. Wow, that's a lot of money. Goodness gracious. That's twice as much as the Hunger Games movie. But yeah, I liked it. I thought it was good. Now, on the plane, I looked over people's shoulders, and a lot of people were watching this movie with Sydney Sweeney in it. Anyone But You. And I was like, I've heard of this movie, but I don't know what it's about. Um, every time I would look across the aisles at different people's screens, this is on a lot of people's screens, and I was like, okay, what the heck? Now, if you guys don't know who Sydney Sweeney is, she was in a show called Euphoria. She got super popular because of that and because she's a beautiful woman. But she's then done some other movies and TV shows, and I think she was in that Madam Web movie that nobody watched, apparently. And then she did this movie. This movie, there's moments in it where um, there's speech that sounds like something from William Shakespeare. There's even a opening scene where someone walks by the side of a building and there's a quote from William Shakespeare, Much Ado About Nothing. And it says, I Googled it, and it says, this script was created from a screenwriter from High School Musical, the musical, and said it's loosely based on William Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing. Okay. The rundown on Google says, despite having an amazing first date, B and Ben's initial attraction quickly sours when they unexpectedly find themselves at a destination wedding in Australia. The pair pretend to be the perfect couple to keep up appearances. Um, this movie box office 219.2 million. Ooh, 87% Rotten Tomatoes, 6.2. Okay, so it didn't rate as well as the others. Now, watching the movie, I like the movie. There's a lot of it that's just kind of silly and hokey and but yeah, it's a cute movie. It's a cute movie. Listen, it's a decent movie to watch on a plane, just like those other two. Um, but yeah, if I had the choice of these three movies to watch on a plane, I think I just would have watched Wonka. I mean, purposely. I'm glad I watched The Hunger Games when on the plane because I was like, oh, thank God I didn't spend money on this one. Ugh. Listen, I could tell a lot of people really tried to make that good, but it was bad. I like the young guy who played a young Snow. He seemed like a really good actor, but yeah, everybody else was just sort of there to collect a check. It looked like. So anyway, Um, I did listen to a really good podcast because this is stuff I heard. Let me tell you about some stuff I heard. I listened to a really good podcast this week. Bert Kreischer interviewing Todd Glass. Todd Glass is a stand-up comedian who has a very unusual brain. Um, there's moments where they've done podcasts together, or Bert has talked about his friendship with Todd, and Todd has done things that have been unexpectedly interesting. Um, he had an apartment in New York one time, and he invited a bunch of people over, and he's like, "Listen, I'm so embarrassed. My apartment's small, but when you guys get here, like, I want to pretend. Can we pretend when you get here? When you get here, pretend that I'm on a plane, and they've given me this giant room on a plane, and just marvel at how large my room is on this plane. Like, forget that you're in a tiny apartment in New York. When you get to the door, be like, "Can you believe they gave me this room? Oh my God, look, there's like a stove here. They fit a little stove next to the fridge, and I can use the bathroom right over here. Like New York's known for having tiny apartments, but he was like, yeah, if I have people over, we can just pretend it's a really large room in a place that isn't New York. And so I don't know. There's moments of their conversations that are very sweet and endearing and lovely. And this podcast, they talk a lot about Andy Frasco, which, if you guys don't know Andy Frasco, I highly recommend checking out his music. Um, there is a song, Dancing Around My Grave, which is uplifting and wonderful. And I became a fan of Andy Frasco's because of Bert having him on the podcast. Apparently, him and Todd Glass have become really close friends as well. And this is a fun podcast to listen to. But yeah, that's my week. Okay. Hope you guys had a good week. It is turning to be warmer weather. We got to watch the Kentucky Derby yesterday, and just for funsies, we were sitting around before it started. Had friends over, and um, the grandbaby had came over. The new grandbaby had come over, not by himself. I mean, his mom brought him, but we got to hang out with Lawson and watching the Kentucky Derby right before they went to race. We were all like playfully just going, "Yeah, I'm going to pull for so and so. I'm going to pull for that person." And my buddy Danny goes, "Oh, look, there's a horse that's named uh what was it? Fantastic Dan or something like that. Had the word Dan in it." And so he's like, "I'm gonna pull for him because he's got Dan in his title." And he ended up winning. It's like 18-1 odds, and he ended up winning. I was like, "Wow, hey man, that's cool. How much you bet?" He's like, yeah, yeah, that'd be funny." So anyway, um, that's it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you guys haven't seen any of the episodes on YouTube, I highly recommend checking it out on YouTube, because every once in a while you get to see what I'm doing here, and you get to see the backdrop of all of the Star Wars stuff. And I got some more Star Wars ordered, some more Legos ordered. My wife sort of playfully allowed me to order some more backdrop stuff, so I'm going to work on that, and then that'll be on the YouTube channel as well. But thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you. I hope you're having a great day. If you've watched any of this stuff that I've watched and you have a difference of opinions, let me know. Send me a line. We have the email and the podcast and the website, www.stuffiheard.com, and all the fun stuff. And we can interact that way. Okay. And if you want to be on the podcast and debate me, we can debate it. I'll prove you wrong, but I'm just kidding. I'm not that. Whatever. So y'all take care. And as always, cue the cow.
Cue the cow. Moo, baby.